I don't know. No credit cards. 17 a person. Is this the waiting line up here?
Looks like it. You can call these.
Yes. Oh, baby.
Oh, wow.
I guess we'll do the guided tour, eh, man? Hemingway's boat. Now that's a small typewriter, just for example, my hand. Man. And didn't quite make it to be age 61.
Go ahead. There we go. Sometimes in the afternoon we get the hangover zombies. So thanks for coming out to the Hemingway Home. My name's Scotty. This is an amazing place here. Has anybody been here before? You been here once? Yep. If you've been here, you know every single thing here has some kind of story behind it. That's what's amazing about it. And it's hard to squeeze it all in about a half hour. So if you have any questions, please just ask. Even if it's like about a picture or a piece of furniture, you can take all the pictures you want. We don't have any restrictions on that. And you can pet the cats all you want too. Babe Ruth is he still back there? Yeah, Babe Ruth. No, that is Babe Ruth. He's back there. That's his favorite spot back there. But yeah, just don't pick him up. He's quite happy. So really quickly, we'll talk about Asa Tift up here because he's the gentleman that built the house. This was way before Ernest got here. This was all the way back in 1851. And Asa Tift was a shipwrecker, which basically means he was a pirate with a license. And if you wrecked your boat, he would rescue you along with all your stuff that night, sell it all back to you for about 3 or 4 times the rate. And that's the way the economy used to work down here. It was a racket. But that's what made him the wealthiest person in Key West. And as you can imagine, that's how he was able to build his home on this piece of land, because we're 16 feet above sea level. This is the only house in Key West that has a basement. It has a full basement. That's where Ernest's wine cellar was, and that's where we keep everything for the bookstore, because it never leaves. Fuentes was Ernest's lifelong fishing buddy from Cuba, and the entire character, Santiago, was all based around him and his life and the stories he used to tell. He lived
Put your feet up.
I love these checks on the wall back here. They're, we got those out of a safe that's in the bookstore right now. It's been there since 1935, and when you see it, you'll see why, because it doesn't move. But Ernest had an endorsement with Abercrombie and Fitch. That's where that upper check is, right there, because they were an outfitter company. There are those, a lot of neat stuff up there. All lives here as well. So this is where it gets fun. So we're gonna catch them all in about 60 seconds here. There's Hadley Richardson. She was a journalist in Chicago. They dated for 5 whole days before they got married. They ran off to Paris because if you wanted to be an author at the time, that was the place to be. And her best friend in Paris was Pauline Pfeiffer. Ernest will marry your friends, keep them away. There was an affair and a divorce. 3 months later is when they got married. They came down here when Uncle Gus bought the house and car for them. And things were great until Martha Gellhorn showed up. She, if you know her history, was an incredibly famous war correspondent. But at that time, she was just a fan wanted to meet Ernest Hemingway, so she put on her favorite dress and tracked him down at Sloppy Joe's, and mission accomplished. They went off and corresponded together, the Spanish Civil War, for about 10 months. Didn't tell Pauline. When she found out, that was the next divorce. And then in 1940, 6 weeks later, is when they got married. They ran down to Cuba. Ernest wanted more privacy, and that's why he built the wall around the outside, because he was tired of all the gawkers in his yard. And they were happy in Cuba for about half a year. Turns out they had huge egos, and they were always competing for the same recording jobs. One of those times when he was in London, he hit his head in a car accident. She couldn't come visit him right away, but Mary Welch did, and she ended up being wife number 4. She wrote for Time magazine. Just wanted to hang out with Ernest at the hospital, and everybody frankly showed up at the same time. So big argument, big divorce, and in 1946, is when they got married. That's the one that stuck. It's one that lasted about 16 years when Ernest finally passed away, and it's mainly because they just got along better. They skied and fished a lot. She catered his ego a lot, and I'm sure she never introduced him. This is Margot and Mariel Hemingway. The 2 boys that lived here from he and Pauline were Patrick and Gregory, and Patrick is still alive and well. He's 93. He lives up in Montana, and Gregory has the very first cat. Snow White the cat was named after the movie, brand new Disney movie that just came out, and she was a gift from Stanley Dexter, who was a naval captain. I just watched it a couple weeks ago. I can't remember the actor's name who played Hemingway.
You know, William.
Man.
The guy who played Hemingway, he just nailed it.
Yes.
He had his character so down.
They were all perfect. Kathy Bates, Gertrude Stein. Kathy Bates, yeah.
So the next room, this is the smallest room. I find it funny that the bathroom is pretty much as big as the nanny's room. Huge bathroom, terrible window placement. You're hoping your friends are on the veranda out there. A century ahead of its time. But Pauline had to make, she was Ernest's mentor. She's the one that told Ernest, if you want to be a successful author, live your life, write about your life experiences, because that's what people want to read. She was absolutely correct about that. This is when he went to Spain, saw bullfights, and this is when he wrote The Sun Also Rises. So it got the attention of the whole world at that time. It was old yet. Not only did he have these head injuries, he suffered from bipolar syndrome, had about a dozen treatments of electroshock therapy at the Mayo Clinic, and it erased his memory. It was considered very progressive at the time. He couldn't connect sentences again, or sentences, and he never wrote again after that. This is also when his liver was starting to fail, and a lot of other health problems. And on top of this, this is when Castro came to power in Cuba. He had to leave his estate that he lived at for 20 years. He flew out of town and left his home and his boat and left manuscripts behind. So, as you can imagine, this was just a really incredibly difficult time in the life of someone who was used to living life to the fullest, because that's what he wrote about, every single thing he did. So that's why in the next room, in the boys' room over here, we've got a lot of the real world pictures from all those events. So we're going to head over here. We have a lot more room to spread out as well. That's an awesome mermaid. An awesome mermaid. Genuine Tiffany chandelier in the boys' room. I'm sure they appreciated that very clearly. All I can think of when I see is like, this is why they can't have nice things. That's what I think of every single time. There's so many great pictures in here. All these military pictures. It's surprising that Ernest was never in the military. When he was awarded the Bronze Star, it was as a civilian, and it's all because of the correspondence work he did during World War II. He was literally there at D-Day, so he covered Normandy, he covered the Battle of the Bulge as well, and during the liberation of Paris, he lived in Paris for 7 years. He spoke the language, knew people in the underground and knew his way through the city, and that's what General Patton needed to know. He pretty much guided him through the city during that whole event. So once again, as unheard of as that is, that's why he was awarded that. The reason he was never in the military, though, Ernest had bad vision. Couldn't sign up with the Army when he was 18 during World War I, so he chose to volunteer at the Red Cross, and they made him an ambulance driver. Couldn't see. Made him an ambulance driver. To add to that, they actually stuck him on a bicycle, of all things, on the front line of Milwaukee and Morality. He got caught in a mortar shell attack, got around 237 shrapnel fragments in his neck and back. It's a miracle he survived. Almost died. Despite that, carried a soldier off the battlefield, saved his life, and for that, he was awarded the Italian War Merit Cross. That's pretty much the equivalent to the Silver Star in our military. So once again, this is an 18-year-old kid with no military training. That's just his character. That's who he was. And they left him stuck in that bed for 6 months while he recovered. He didn't speak Italian, so he couldn't communicate with his doctors. He whistled at his nurses all day long. That's how he kept their attention. His favorite nurse, though, was Agnes von Kurowski, and she's the one that spoke English. She was supposed to be the first one on the wall of wives down there, but she didn't follow him back to the U.S. She friend-zoned him, sent him a letter in the mail, said, "Ernest, I'm too old for you. I think of you more like a son than a lover." She was already engaged to an Italian captain and just never told him. So, 9 years later, when he wrote A Farewell to Arms, or finished it up, I should say, this is when he killed the nurse off at the end of the book. A very unpleasant death. It was a large
Sloppy Joe, eh?
And the second tour over here, this was a disaster.
The cat.
She goes, yeah.
Yeah.
Into it quickly.
We don't breed them for the cocoa because that's just not healthy for them. We do 1 litter a year, and the 4 healthiest kittens are the ones that don't get fixed. Everybody else does. That's how we keep from having 1 billion cats on the property. But also, we do have kittens, by the way. Anybody know about kittens? Evidently did not know. I had to keep them secret for 3 months, so we'll see them downstairs. We got the name. This was the gate off of the Spanish monastery. It's about 400 years old, and Ernest made a big donation, brought it back so his handyman could build this for him. This is actually 2 different mattresses from Sears and Roebuck and delivered on the train. Same thing with all these little chairs. Did everybody see the little chairs in the bathroom too?
You want to count those? Famous bed.
I know, it's unreal. Dustin and his assistant Terry, they do all this. I can't even fathom it because we have 4 people that do nothing but pet care. He does an amazing job here. The building across the way, though, that used to be the carriage house, and the hayloft was made into his writing studio. The reason we're looking at it from up here is because, as much as it sounds like a joke, this is true. He had a catwalk built from that corner going straight across to the other side, and he did that so at dawn he would get up and type every single day. He wanted to be able to go straight across. He was obsessively dedicated to that schedule, and he pretty much did that every day until noon. Sometimes he would fish in the afternoon, but like I said before, he always ended up at Sloppy Joe's doing his research in the evening. If anybody's read To Have and Have Not, anybody read that one? Not a happy book, is it? No. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about when I say people were doing unspeakable things to survive down here during the Depression. And it's all the stories that he heard firsthand from all the criminals in town. He just changed all their names and turned them into that book. So it's an incredibly dark book, but it's an accurate picture of how hard life was down here during the Depression. And then around the corner, amazing view of the lighthouse. Has anybody done that tour? No? Not done the lighthouse? Put that on your list. That's really, really worth the climb. Ernest said they built it just for him so he could wander his way home every night, no matter how much research he did. Any guess why they built it in the middle of town instead of on the shore where you're supposed to put a lighthouse? Nope. This used to be the shore. We all come back here and look at the second set of trees. Right back there is where the ocean started. It was the Navy that came in after World War II and they dredged all that shallow water out. So it's all human made. They built the Truman Annex and they did a massive expansion of the Navy shipyard. Frankly, the island is just much, much bigger. You can really see the difference if you come around here. I'm sure everybody saw the fountain when you first came in. Toilet in the front window of the house, isn't that great?
Yeah.
Wonderful plan. Chandelier in the bathroom, toilet in the front window of the house. Gotta have that. For all the good taste that Pauline had, she messed that one up by there. But yeah, from up here, you can tell the fountain, it's shaped like a ship. This was supposed to look like a ship going out to sea, but the Navy moved the sea. They moved it well over half a mile away from where that shoreline was out there. So once again, that's how much this island actually changed. The amazing, you were talking about the views before. It had this beautiful oceanfront view, and now it's all the way out there. You can't even see it anymore, especially with the trees. And down here, we're going to come down and see the bottom of the studio. Please be careful on these stairs because this beam is really low.
Oops.
I know from experience you do not want to hit your head on this, so please be careful. I was turned around saying don't hit your head on this beam,
And you
I turned
did.
right around and stuck right into it. Oh my gosh. You won't do it a second time. So we're all gonna meet up here. If you live in those, we take them home. They're so good. Oh, they're ridiculously good.
Man, bunch of bananas there.
That blew all that away, so that's why it's gone now. The reason everything else is fine though is these walls are about 18 inches thick. That's where the basement came from, where they quarried out all those stones. So when there's a hurricane, nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. During Irma, the shank trip a little bit. That's about it.
Something pewy.
But the studio itself, when he and Pauline got divorced, she had the foresight to not throw his stuff out, and because of that, it's still here. We have his furniture, his hunting and fishing trophies on the wall, but mostly we have his typewriter. That's the big one, and it's the Royal Portable Typewriter that he wrote about 70% of all his material on in that space. That seems surreal every time I think about that, because it's stuff like that just disappears in the history. So we obviously can't all fit up there at once, but after we finish up, we're just about done back here. Please come back up, go up a couple people at a time and take some pictures and go see it. It's the Before we go to the pool, we're actually going to stop and look at the beautiful cat fountain. This is an important part of the story. There would be no pool without this. And usually, Rita Hayworth is down here. She's sleeping. She has some really awesome thumbs. Rita's the oldest cat on the property. Her and her sister, Marlena Dietrich, they're in their later 16s, so they're almost 17.
So count the toes, Dave.
But she loves to hang out by her fountain all day. She does not care that this used to be the urinal over at Sloppy Joe's. I'm not making it up. It's painfully obvious when you're gonna look at it. So what happened was, Sloppy Joe's used to be where Captain Tony's is. When their rent went up, they had a big moving party, and Ernest figured, well, he spent a fortune down that drain. He'd more than paid for it. So he took it out of the trash pile that night because Pauline was bugging him for a fountain. He figured, oh, well, she'll do something cool with this. She'll be happy. Well, she wasn't happy because this is a urinal in her yard, and she did the best she could. She made it nice with the olive jar and the Spanish tile. It's still a urinal, and they were both really stubborn about this, and they wouldn't budge, and it became the battle of the pools. It turned into his pool versus her pool over here. So we're gonna finish up and we're gonna get a good look at our revenge pool at the very end here.
Oh yeah.
Still the largest residential pool in Key West. You can't even get a permit to build one this big. All the land parcels are too small. But she was so proud of the pool, and despite the fact that Ernest never wanted a pool, this is where his boxing ring used to be. We had a full-size regulation boxing ring. Everybody in town came because it was a big deal to watch Ernest box and watch him referee the fights, until he took Martha to Spain and she busted him on it. And her opponent busted him on it. When she found out, she tore his boxing ring out, gave it away to the brothel around the corner for whatever reason they needed it for. And spent the next 10 months putting this in to surprise him. Well, when he got back from Spain, the big surprise was it cost $20,000. That's 1937. That's about 350 grand in today's money. And so this was the fight, the big fight. And he was like, "Holy, we spent this ridiculous amount of money on a pool I didn't even want." Who really paid for the pool? That's the real kicker. It was Uncle Gus. Of course it was.
Yeah.
Uncle Gus, his hobby was building homes for his family because he was generous, very generous person. But he could do that because Gustav Pfeiffer had a chemical company that morphed into a huge pharmaceutical company. Pfeiffer. Pfizer, that's it. Uncle Gus was crazy Pfizer. It really isn't.
Kitty won't in.
It's exactly what it does. Or if
You got 3 cats over there. Hey. People waiting? Gotta wait here.
One person at a time.
Nice view of everything.
No, I'm glad we did it.
Oh, here
Here he goes.
he goes. Hey, kitty, kitty. So this is where he did all his writing. Yeah. And his famous typewriter. That's all men need.
Yeah.
After you go to Sloppy Joe's. Where's all them 6 toes? You got too many toes there, don't you? Supposedly. She's hiding them. Oh well. Yeah. Miriam, the chef.
Strange place to get married if you're in the, if you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.